Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. For come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to look to you, the Kansas State sporting news you so love. I'm Ace Edwards, right alongside
Connor Baltazar.
And if we sound exhausted, it's because we are. Because genuinely all-time classic game for the Sunflower Showdown in a way that I don't think Connor and I were prepared for. I know I wasn't prepared for it.
I certainly was not.
Yeah. Before we get into the more general recap, we do want to thank the sponsors of today's episode. That is Greg, Arthur, and Grandma. Thank you, Grandma. And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out the official Aggieville Alleycats supporters link found in our podcast and Twitter bios. But K-State ends up walking away. Walking away is generous. I think I'll use the word escape. They escaped this game, winning 29-27 in what was a back-and-forth affair. And, I mean, first and foremost, we got KU's best shot. Like, this is probably, Connor, we talked about this before the episode, but this is the third year in a row where we have almost certainly gotten KU's best shot. And, yeah, to be able to survive it with massive scares 2 years in a row, I think it just sort of speaks to the resilience of the team. But, oh, my God, I'm not sure I can survive many more of these.
Yeah, this game took years off of my life. I don't think I'll see 60 at this rate. And I implore Chris Kleiman to get back to the margins of old. So that way I might be able to claw some years back, or at the very least not lose any more. But yeah, just objectively, that is like an all-time classic K-State game. Obviously, you prefer to fare a little better against a team that's now 2-6 and has to win out to make a bowl game. Although we did kind of know going in to the game that this is a team that plays a lot of close games, and once again reaffirmed that they lose a lot of close games. They're 0-6 in one-score games this season, which is just absolutely absurd. That's like Nebraska from like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah,
just utility. I mean,
it makes me wonder what would happen if that Nebraska team and this KU team played. Would it just be infinite overtimes with no one scoring?
It might just be like trying to divide by 0. I don't think you can. I don't think the game would ever end.
Yeah, but like you said, it was objective, all-time classic. And, of course, the difference ends up being two critical, more specifically one critical, special teams error by KU in the second quarter, where they decide to field the kickoff at the 1-yard line and step out also at the 1-yard line, which forces a safety, which ends up being the score difference for K-State in this game. Yeah. If that doesn't happen, the best that K-State can do is tie with the field goal. And if they don't also miss an extra point, they need a touchdown to win this game. And, speaking of that field goal, shout out Chris Tennant, because good Lord. Like, I full disclosure, I had basically resigned myself to losing the moment I saw Chris Tennant take the field, because I knew he had the leg for it, but I don't know. I'm glad that Chris Tennant believes in himself now more than I believed in him, because that was money to get the go-ahead score.
Yeah, I mean, the only question really was, in terms of accuracy, it split the uprights perfectly. I mean, it really was about as perfect a kick as you can ask for on a 51-yard field goal. The only thing is, I guess there could have been more leg behind it, but I mean, not necessary. It cleared the crossbar. So, that's going to go down as an all-time K-State field goal make. And I think has probably finally cemented the redemption arc of Chris Tennant, because he said in postgame, and he's correct, that he's gotten a ton of flack in his time as a K-State kicker, and that's not entirely without merit, although I don't think we on this show ever really got onto that train just because we knew he was pretty young and we're just kind of waiting and seeing. But I don't really fault people for not being happy with him early in his career. But really, I mean, if you just look at his stats from the last 2 years, and particularly this year, he's been nails. Really, last year he went 11 of 14 and only missed one extra point. This year he's 12 of 14 on field goals, and yeah, then he's tied his career long with 51 yet again, and his only misses have been from 40 plus. So he's been a very consistent kicker for
Yeah.
K-State this year.
And one of those misses was just super weird where it caught sudden wind and just died, which I still don't know how that happened.
Yeah, that was a weird one. I think I remember the one that you're talking about. But I mean, man, Chris Tennant, like, really, really good kicker. Like, and I think he's firmly cemented that at this point.
Do you want to talk about the crowd or the referees next?
We can talk about the crowd first, because it won't be as wholly negative and whiny, I think. But like, I mean, I will start by saying that I think that last KU drive was probably the loudest single segment that I've ever had at a K-State football game. Like, it wasn't consistently that loud throughout the entire game, and that's not really a critique. I mean, there was just a lot of energy being pulled out of the stadium at a lot of key points.
Yeah.
But that last bit of the game was probably among the loudest that I've ever heard. It was the loudest I've ever been at a K-State game as well, and my ears were ringing for probably like 2 or 2.5 hours after the game as well. But really, I really do think that if the crowd didn't get into it there at the end, I'm not saying things change, but I think we definitely had a pretty big impact there, honestly, on that last drive. There was a false start. Might have been nerves, but I like to think that the crowd has at least something to do with that. And that was a big false start, but another sellout as well, over 52,000 for the first time in a while, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, and there was a perhaps surprisingly large KU contingent at this game, which you actually heard on a few occasions, which, first off, shout out to them for showing up, but also never ever return. As I don't want to hear you ever again. But
yeah, the KU contingent was kind of interesting because I kept looking over to the visitor section, like where they normally are, and there weren't really a ton of them there localized there, but they were more kind of sprinkled throughout the stadium in like pockets, which was interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, they were making their presence known, and credit to them. But also, whenever you start chanting things at the home stadium of the team, you're just kind of asking for God to smite you. And we learned that God hates the University of Kansas for several reasons, but that might just be that specific reason for this day. But on the wholly negative, actually, I guess I can talk about the positives as well. I had a very similar experience with the K-State contingent. I still think that the Mo Bamba Oklahoma 2019 was probably a little louder, but it's definitely up there with the loudest K-State, like, especially individual moments. It's up there. It's very high up there. It's probably number 2 or 3 at least.
Yeah, at least from where I was sitting, I would say it was at least equal to that moment in 19. Which that could be the difference, is because I was like right by the student section, you were across the field, like, so that could very well just be the difference in perception. But yeah, most of the game the crowd was into it, but wasn't necessarily as loud. And then there, of course, were plenty of moments where they weren't really into it because, I mean, there was just a kind of a nervous energy lurking, I think, because I mean, nobody wants to be there like when the streak dies. And the law of averages says eventually it's going to.
It's gonna die eventually. I just want it. Well, first off, I never want it to die, but if I had to pick a place for it to die, absolutely let it be in Lawrence.
Yeah.
So I can laugh at them whenever they tear down the goalposts and then say that it's A, not a rivalry, and B, not their Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with that as well. It's like, if they're gonna start winning, I guess let it be their place. Like I'm sure they don't mind as much in basketball that we don't ever really beat them in Allen. We always win here, so fair trade. Although the trade I would prefer is just to have the streak continue in perpetuity. So
Yeah,
we'll start with that.
yeah.
But
But
you want to talk about refs as well, right?
yeah, they were terrible. They were awful. And again, this every time that we ever talk about refs, neither of us particularly like talking about them because most of the time when you're talking about them, you lose, and it's kind of like a losing, like whiners mentality. We won this game, and the refs were still abysmal. Like there were about 2 or 3 phantom PI calls on K-State, including 2 where a receiver literally just tripped. And Kobe Bryant was doing Kobe Bryant things, also known as stealing people's social security cards because he's just holding on to their wallets for dear life. And nothing was called there. The one on Keegan Johnson on, I think it was like the first or second drive, I got like premium viewing of that. I had the angle, Blue. I swear to you, I had the angle. And you can literally just see Keegan Johnson's jersey snap like back immediately. And everyone in the stadium, like even more so than usual, knew it was holding, except for the guy who was 5 feet away from the play as it happened. And that's disregarding all the holds that weren't called on the KU offensive line, which, being fair, their offensive line was kind of on a heater. But yeah, the refs were abysmal this game. Like there was no home cooking in this game.
Yeah, that was one of the more surprising parts of the game to me. Is I honestly was thinking that it may be the flip side. I was thinking that the crowd may have some effect, and the refs may end up being more in K-State's favor, but it really kind of felt like the opposite. The only call I think you could even fathom as being something that was to K-State's favor would be more of a no call on Marquise Siegel's interception in the end zone. And even then, with the way they were, or at least weren't calling pass interference for most of the game, it wouldn't have qualified, I don't think, based on how they had been going with it. But VJ Payne's defensive pass interference was pretty bad. That was, I thought, a really soft call. A few other no calls on defensive pass interference and holding. I was kind of surprised on that booth-initiated targeting review. They didn't call targeting.
Yeah, that was targeting. That was targeting.
Like I wasn't honestly that upset that they didn't call it in real time. But when I saw the replay, I was like, oh yeah, he definitely led with the crown of his helmet. And then they didn't overturn it, which I thought was especially strange because it wasn't something that I thought like was a major issue. But when you slow it down, it's like it was kind of painfully obvious that it was targeting, but they didn't call it. I think the worst officiating on the night, though, was I do think that the KU tackles got away with quite a bit in terms of holding. There were a few times in particular, one with Stufflebean and one with Chidi Obiizor, and a couple with Tobios and Sanmi, where it was pretty shocking. I felt that because there was some pretty clear jersey tugging from the offensive tackles, and there was one time in particular with Toby where he had one hand on his nameplate and one hand on his chest, and so
That is
And
called
they,
holding.
yeah. So I did not. I was really surprised that they didn't get anything there. They eventually called a holding on KU, I think, but it was pretty late in the game when they did. But they were letting them play a bit too much, and they weren't really being even keeled when they were calling things. So I was very disappointed with the officiating in this game because I think it otherwise detracted from a good game.
Yeah. But that's pretty much it for the general notes. Now we can go into game day grades, where we go through every single position group, including coordinators, giving them a grade from A plus to F. A plus meaning they near single-handedly won us the game, and F meaning they are single-handedly lost us the game. We didn't lose, but there was still someone that I was heavily debating giving an F for this. But as always, we start with the man under center, and that is Avery Johnson. And this is sort of the ultimate duality of man moment for a quarterback, because there are two moments, well, three moments in particular that stick out that could have very, very easily been backbreakers for K-State. The first one that I'm thinking of is he tried to reload cancel a pump fake apparently, and then fumbled the ball when no one else was around him, which that I but that could have been a backbreaking moment. They end up not scoring off of it. Then Avery missing, granted, this was a very, very difficult throw, so I'm not mad about it, but missing Ancio in the back of the end zone. It's a hard throw, but that also could have been a backbreaker. But then rolling into a sack to make it 3rd and 20, that was bad. Like, 1 and 3 are the really, really bad ones. But outside of that, for all of the excellent moments that Avery Johnson had, this is very, very far from his best game. And I don't think I'm going to get a lot of pushback from that. You know, he finishes 19 of 34, 253 yards, 2 touchdowns, as well as 14 carries, 67 yards, and another touchdown. But I think if you asked him, he would say this wasn't his biggest game or best game, because there were a few times that he just wasn't as accurate as he has been in the past few weeks. And there are a few times where he made the choice to throw short of the sticks when he really shouldn't have. And there are also times that he probably should have run a little bit more. I'm trying to think of when he was like trying to hit a crossbody throw to J-Jack, which granted, Jaden Jackson probably should have caught it. But the easier play is to just take your 6 yards for the first down and run out of bounds. So Avery Johnson had a good game, but I struggle to call it an A game. I would honestly call it like a B game. If you take away either of the fumble or the really bad rolling into pressure to make it 3rd and 20, he probably makes his way up to B plus or A minus. But I'm just thinking in the alternative, like those 2 plays alone could have killed the game for K-State.
Yeah, I gave him a B as well. And it wasn't because he had a bad performance or anything. I mean, normally he's getting A's. This was still a good Avery Johnson performance, and he definitely had his share of errors that he made. The ones that you listed were all the ones that I was concerned about. But I do also think that he had a few moments where he was kind of let down by some of the guys around him. He had a throw that from where I was sitting looked like it was destined to be tipped and intercepted. That actually was about a perfect layer throw to Jaden Jackson, and it just went straight through his hands. Because I remember when I saw it first, like in live action, I thought that was a really bad decision. But then I saw the replay angle, and I was like, "Oh, that's actually a perfect throw." And it was so perfect that J-Jack was not ready for it. And that was really frustrating. Keegan Johnson had a drop as well. There was somebody sitting behind me that just absolutely hates Keegan Johnson. Like, it was a little irrational. But yeah, Avery running the ball other than like you said, the really bad roll out into a sack that lost him like 13 yards. He had a pretty effective day as a runner. Of course, had a big rushing touchdown, and was um, seemed kind of pretty much back to normal as far as running goes, um, to the point where it makes you wonder, like, was he even not healthy for the West Virginia game, or did we just decide not to worry about running him that game? But a B for Avery Johnson, and not a bad game, but just could have been better. Had some missed opportunities.
Yeah, and I'm just hung up on those what could have been like generational heartbreak moments that ended up not mattering, but still. The running back room is complicated because DJ still got 100 yards. Dylan Edwards almost had 100 yards. Well, he had 80 yards from scrimmage. So, you have nearly 200 yards from scrimmage. Actually, I think you're pretty much there. You're like at 195 or 196 with DJ's receiving yards. So the running backs almost account for 200 yards. But there were also so many times that DJ kind of got caught in neutral in particular. It was mostly him who got caught in neutral with his vision. It's kind of the same problem less so than what he had with West Virginia, because West Virginia was selling out. KU wasn't. KU was just playing every pull perfectly, and the offensive line will get there. We're just kind of missing assignments on a few running plays. So you sort of get in a moment where you're like, okay, well, how against the running backs and how much do I hold against the people blocking for them? I ended up giving the running backs a B+. And to me, that this should have been a game where probably Dylan Edwards should have gotten a little more involved than he was, because this was a little bit of a step back. And this is of all the times that we could have used Dylan, he sort of proved why we should on the 44-yard breakout run, where I very rarely feel bad for a KU player, but staring at that free safety in that moment, just with Dylan, it's that same feeling where you have with Deuce Vaughn, where you just see someone one-on-one and it's like, well, I'm really sorry that you're going to be a part of this highlight tape, buddy. And Dylan Edwards ends up getting caught from a weird angle. It's not the safety who makes the tackle, but it's I just remember feeling horrible for that KU safety in that moment. Well, that man's about to get posterized. But I ended up settling on a B+ for them, because they did have a really, really good day, but I felt like there's just a bit more that they could have done.
Yeah, I give them a B+ too. DJ running the ball, his numbers are pretty inflated by the one long run he had of 54 yards.
Where Carver Willis was keeping up with him.
Yeah, that was a little scary to see, but it was still a good run nonetheless. Otherwise, he definitely created some issues with, like you said, sticking in neutral. But he also was just kind of in some bad spots because KU just defensively was in the right places. And then additionally, Dylan only had 5 touches offensively, but he was really effective with his touches and should have gotten the ball more than he did. So, but that's not really his fault, so I can't really fault him for that. But he did a lot with the carries that he was given, and pretty much every time he touched the ball, he was really very obviously fighting for every last inch that he could get. So I was really happy with how Dylan performed. And then DJ, he's 55 yards away from 1,000 on the season already. So that's a milestone coming up here for DJ. But yeah, this was a good, an above average, almost great, but not quite great day for the running backs.
Yeah. The wide receivers, I feel like, are kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum, where they have bats, but good Lord, they had a few moments where it was bad. I mean, Chase Brown ends up padding his stats, five catches, 98 yards, so 4 catches for 56. because, we're not counting the OPI that was declined. They go down in the stat book, but I barely count them. Keegan Johnson, 4 catches for 57. Dante Cephas, 2 for 21. Jaden Jackson, 1 for 3. So, you have a couple of really solid performances. What you don't see is Jaden Jackson dropping 2 beauties of passes. One beauty and one, you should probably catch that. And then Dante Cephas not making 2 admittedly difficult grabs. And then Keegan Johnson had a drop. There was, despite the stat line, the wide receivers didn't have their greatest day even on the season, which is so weird to say because statistically this would go down as one of their best performances. And yet I somehow think it's among their least impressive because you can't even make the excuse that they weren't getting open, because they were getting open. They were just dropping it. And it was driving me insane. But I still can't hold that. Well, I can hold it against them. That's why they ended up getting a B- for me. But they made plays. I don't want to take that away from them. They made plays, but they left so much meat on the bones for making bigger plays or being a more reliable weapon for the quarterback. And yes, I am still upset that Jaden Jackson basically dropped another perfectly layered throw by Avery Johnson because Avery Johnson just decided that he can do that.
Yeah, I have some pretty similar thoughts about the receiver room because, it is weird to look at the box score and see that the receivers were, for the most part, pretty productive, but they still really struggled in a lot of ways. I gave them a C. I had some things that I liked, but this wasn't so much a receivers not doing anything. This was just a mix of receivers doing a lot, both positively and negatively. So I just bounced them out of the C because they had some really, really rough moments, and some of their production, like Jace Brown getting that free 42 yards to get him over 500 on the season. You take those if you're Jace Brown, but it's still a bit of a mirage on what they actually did, which Jace is now at his set new career highs in receptions and yards with 30 catches for 518. But Keegan had some key drops. Keegan only had 4 catches on 9 targets. We targeted him a lot in this game. And he still had some very effective plays, like his catch and run sometime in the second half. Can't remember exactly when. That was a really good play for Keegan Johnson. Is something I've been wanting to see more of from him for quite some time. And another shout out goes to DJ Giddens on that play for doing the thing that Jackson Smith and Jigba did a few weeks ago, where you just keep running the route and let the defender stay with you. And I got Keegan from probably 15 yards, like 35. So shout out to DJ there for either being instructed properly or also watching the NFL. But yeah, this was a game. I think you put it well. They left a lot on the field in a not good way, but still did some things worth recognition, but left a lot to be desired. So they get a C.
The tight end room, they did get the 2 receiving touchdowns. Will Ancio, 2 for 29, the touchdown. Garrett Oakley, 1 for 2 with a touchdown. He ended up getting hurt, and Swanson went 1 for 8 with a catch as well. But I ended up leaving the game a lot more impressed with the tight ends than I was with the receivers. And I think it's mostly because the tight ends were at least reliable. Of course, they accounted for both of the passing touchdowns and should have had a third, which that is ultimately what costed in room an A, anything in the A range for me. That Ansiao drop Like single hand, that might be the biggest drop from a single play, no pun intended, in the grades, like in the history of the show. But I still left pretty happy with the tight ends and how they were assisting on blocks. Like the pin schemes were working pretty well, at least the pin part of the pin and pull running game, also known as most of what the tight ends do. But I walked away impressed with the tight ends, but I can't give them an A when Ancio, if he catches that ball, makes this game so much more comfortable, and it doesn't come down to the last minute. So I gave them a B plus.
I also gave them a B plus. Will Ancio has been a revelation in this kind of middle third of the season. He's got half of his catches are touchdowns. He's got 6 catches and 3 touchdowns this year. Garrett Oakley, he's up to 3 touchdowns. He's got 10 catches as well. Braden Lofton was warming up, but I don't remember seeing him.
I don't think he played.
Yeah, so I was a little bit surprised because he, from a distance, didn't seem to be hobbled at all while warming up. So I'd imagine at this point we probably see him next week. Total projection, I have no idea. I don't know the guy, but I imagine we'll probably see him work his way back into the rotation. But this is a really great game for the tight ends. But that drop by NCO in the end zone, that was one of the more painful singular moments that I've had in a while as a K-State fan. That kind of felt like the one that would come back to bite us. But luckily it didn't. But that's I guess a learning experience and nothing else. It's really tough that in that goal to go series there that we missed Ancio we missed him once. Yeah, we missed him once, and he dropped it second one. So he nearly had 2 touchdowns there, or had a shot at the touchdown twice, I should say. But B plus for the Titans.
Offensive line, this is fascinating because if you look at advanced analytics or anything, the offensive line had a really, really good day pass blocking. Avery ends up getting sacked twice. Only one of those I would really even say was on the offensive line. But the run blocking, I keep going back to the missed assignments because there are a few times that KU just played it really, really well. Sometimes as an offensive line, there's not a damn thing that you can do about that. As some Star Trek character said, Connor, the quote. You can say the quote. You're the Star Trek fan. It's possible to lose while committing no error.
Yeah, that's Captain Picard. Wise guy.
Yeah, but there were some times that the offensive line were just blowing assignments in the running game. And that probably cost DJ at least 50 yards. And it probably cost Dylan a couple yards too. But yeah, Hecht did not have a good game, which is I think this is his first, I'm not going to say that he had an abysmal game, but this is his first not good game of the year because he's been really solid the entire year. But yeah, the offensive line run blocking, not great, especially with how often they were just missing their guys. But in pass blocking, they were pretty solid. I will slightly disagree with the pressure metrics because I do think there were times that Avery was pressured that the offensive line wasn't getting credited for. I ended up giving them a C minus because if you're getting out talented, that's one thing. That's almost more forgivable because there's not a damn thing you can really do about that. But if you're messing up assignments and that's costing everyone else on your team, that's when I start getting mad. And that's when I start taking off points really, really quickly. So I ended up giving them a C minus.
I gave them a C. Similar reasons. I was fairly annoyed with how we blocked for the run game. Like you said, pass game, generally, we did all right there. Also, for what it's worth, this is a bit of a backtrack, but Braden Lofton apparently played 5 snaps according to PFF. I don't remember that, but they probably watched a little bit less emotionally than I did, so that's totally fine. But yeah, disappointing game. 2 weeks in a row that the run game has not really been blocked super well. Last week wasn't so much on them. This week it definitely is on the offensive line more. Some of that is just that KU was um, they were pursuing really quickly. They weren't stacking the box like West Virginia was, but they had guys ready to step in and make the tackle most of the time. Um, but pass blocking was still decent. I seem to remember a rep where Sam Hecht really got beat pretty bad right up the middle.
Yep.
I can't remember if it was a pass or run play though. I think it was a run play.
It was a
So but which was unfortunate because Hecht has been quite good this year. So shame that this was kind of his first, or at least he had a few noticeable bad moments. But another thing, I guess, notable, no rotation in this game. I think that's the first time this season that we haven't seen any Langang or Pastore coming in. But yeah, definitely, we've seen much better from this offensive line, and we will see much better from this offensive line. It just wasn't a banner day for them.
Not at all. Speaking of not banner days, my feelings about Connor Riley in this game are a little complicated because on one hand, KU's defense was just making plays. On the other hand, he kept putting the players in bad situations that they just sort of had to rely on talent to bail out of. The sense to stick to pin and pull plays when KU was adjusting their line at the last minute and messing with the blocking assignments. Like the insistence on doing that and not throwing in the counter punch of, more toss plays or anything like that, that really, really, really bothers me, because it's not like they did it once and they would only pull it out once every couple of plays. No, they were doing that every single play. And it just seemed like Connor Riley didn't have a good answer for it. So I would wager that a lot of the offensive line's failings actually go back to the play calling. But I also keep going back to the times where, Connor Riley had a few times where they were running routes short of the sticks on a gotta have it third down, Keegan Johnson on a doubles in concept. And I say all of this and we still won the game, but I couldn't help walking away disappointed in how Connor Riley was calling this game. And we still put up 29. There's no big turnovers, and I think what I'm trying to say is, just because there wasn't a whole lot of abysmally bad, you also don't have a lot of in terms of good to write home about that was purely based on play calling outside of red zone tight end stuff, because apparently Connor Riley puts in the Konami code at the goal line and every tight end gets open. But I was disappointed in Riley this game, so I ended up giving him a D+.
I gave him a C, pretty similar reasons. I thought he had his moments where it seemed like things were going to get fixed, and then we kind of revert back. DJ had a really nice run towards the beginning of the half. Dylan, he had a nice run as well. Both of our best runs on the day, as far as I can recall, they were more outside concepts, and most of our inside stuff was just not really working. We had our moments where we were still able to get things to work, and DJ had a couple of runs where he there was one in particular late in the game where I don't know how he managed to stay up, but it went from being 3 or 4 yards to something like 8 or 9, I think, and that was a really great run. But yeah, I was not super happy with a lot of the game. Granted, any day you come out on the good end of a football game, that's a like you can't complain that much. But we've definitely seen better from Connor Riley in terms of making adjustments. This just wasn't his best day. That's just going to happen. But C game is a C game.
Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, the defensive line was bordering on abysmal. And some of that was them getting held and it just not being called, but the defensive line was not particularly good this game. And I mean, the entire team managed 2 TFLs. None of them were defensive linemen, and they managed 1 sack, which again, none of that was defensive linemen. And they just didn't make an impact in a way that we're sort of used to seeing them make this year. And some of that is how KU is scheming up protections, and scheming up protections can also be a euphemism for holding, depending on how you're feeling about it. But this is probably the most disappointed I've been in the K-State defensive line in several years. I ended up giving them a D-.
I gave them a C-. I was not very happy with what they did. I felt like they toughened up a bit there at the end of the game. But Damian Ilalio was still kind of flying all over the field and making tackles. The last couple of weeks, it seems like he's just been absolutely everywhere, and that was consistent at least. But pressure off the edge was definitely inconsistent. Some of it was definitely holding. Tobias Nsami was generally pretty effective, at least getting to the outside shoulder and making life difficult for the tackle. So this was definitely not a great game or a banner day for the defensive line. They still did some things that I thought were at least somewhat encouraging or somewhat decent. But in the run game in particular, it really seemed like that they were struggling for a lot of the game. So I can't do any better than a C-.
Speaking of struggling for the majority of the game, the linebackers didn't have themselves a banner day either, except for one human being who decided to go God mode, because Austin Romaine apparently took a lot of people not seeing him, us not seeing him as like this elite tier linebacker. He took that personally, and you could make a pretty convincing argument near single-handedly won the K-State defense this game with the forced fumble and just the relentless pursuit of the ball carrier at any time. Dez and Austin Moore did not have good games. Austin Moore in particular had a very, very bad game, which I think makes the fact that he waved the weed at the end of the game all the funnier. I think that just makes it even better. But yeah, no, Austin Moore did not have a good game. He was not staying in his run lane. And granted, some of that is being constantly told to blitz when Austin Moore is a much better sort of play in space linebacker who's going to stay to his run lane. And the moment that you sort of ask him to deviate from that, that's sort of where the biggest weakness in his game comes in. Dez sort of had the same problem that DJ had, where he kind of got caught in neutral, which is so rare for Dez, who plays at 100 miles per hour at all times, pretty much. But there are a few times that if Dez just fully commits to being a heat-seeking nuclear missile, like he may honestly finish this game with 2 or 3 TFLs as opposed to just the 1 sack. Like if he commits to sticking at his angle, and granted, there's still the chance that he gets juked out of his shoes, but at least at that point, he's still affecting the throw a little bit more than just sort of standing in the middle of nowhere. But shout out Austin Romaine from bringing this grade all the way up from a D- to a C by himself.
Yeah, I gave them a C+ for fairly similar reasons because The other linebackers definitely had some pretty difficult moments in this game, to put it as lightly as possible. Austin Romaine is continuing to play at not only a All Big 12 level, but at a fringe All American level. Might be playing his way into being an All American by the season's end. But he's just been absolutely electric this year. We didn't see a lot of other linebackers, honestly.
Saw Rex.
Yeah. The only 4 that we saw according to PFF are Austin, Dez, and Rex. So not much there in terms of additional participation. But Rex, he had a really, really, really bad missed tackle on that first drive, and he pretty much was the reason that Sevion Morrison had that long touchdown run, because he had him in the backfield and just didn't bring him down. And that was extremely frustrating. Dez had his moments, but at a few different occasions looked a step slow. Austin Moore, same story. Austin Romaine just continues to just carry this unit as of late. So shout out to Austin Romaine. He deserves all the flowers in the world.
This is going to be a weird change of pace because I'm actually kind of happy with how the defensive backs played. I sort of expected I didn't expect Jalen Daniels to throw for more, because I still don't think Jalen Daniels is a particularly good quarterback, but I sort of expected the throws that he did make to be a little bit more damaging, and I also didn't really expect the INT to happen so early, which, by the way, that was a really damn good user alert by Marquise Siegel. And this is a grade that the more and more I thought about it, the more and more the grade sort of kicked up to me, mostly off of the back of the Siegel interception, Parrish being, serviceable, and VJ Payne just flying around. I will say that this game is not without its warts. Keenan Garber was bad. I don't feel like there's a way around it. He rolled his D20 and just decided today was not going to be a good day. I feel like that's just kind of been Keenan Garber the majority of the season. He's either the best corner on the field or an active liability. And it's a game by game thing. So, Zashawn Rich also got some significant playing time, which if you had that on your bingo card, no, you didn't. But I was actually happy with how the defensive backs played because of the amount of times that they were put on islands. I will say that I will have a seizure if I ever see Jack Fabris playing center field again, because Jalen Daniels should have had 2 touchdowns, and the second one would have been exclusively Jack Fabris's fault. But I was happy. I am giving them a B. I was fine with them.
I gave him a C+. Funnily enough, with Keenan Garber, I agree he did not play well, but he also had the only 2 registered pass breakups on the day for K-State. So he was either getting toasted or actually was right there in coverage and making an actual pass breakup. But his bad moments were really bad. He just got dusted by Luke Grimm for an easy touchdown at one point near the goal line. Kendry Steiger came in at one point. He only played like 2 or 3 snaps, and one of them was him just getting, again, toasted by Luke Grimm on the one deep, the singular deep passing concept they have, which is just a deep post. And they ran it against us twice. One was like a 40-yard catch. One should have been a 50-yard touchdown. And however, they did, for the first time, maybe in recorded history, properly cover a flea flicker. Because we figured going into this game, they were going to run a flea flicker like at least twice, because we have seemingly just not had an answer for those. But no, both guys that were running deep routes against us on the flea flicker, they both had 2 guys on them. So shout out on that, I guess, at least. Um, yeah, still gave up some clutch catches, defense wide, um, but defensive backs particular. Definitely could have been better. I wasn't as high on them as you were, but they still were, I think, better than the front line of the defense, which is really weird to say.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation, I suppose.
Yeah, and remember when I said at the beginning of this episode that there was one person who I was debating giving an F, even if we won this game? Enter Joe Clanderman, because if Jeff Grimes if he didn't decide to do Jeff Grimes things in the fourth quarter, Joe Clanderman was going to get clown suited by Jeff Grimes, which, if you're getting clown suited by Jeff Grimes, retire. Like there is no recourse for you. But that last drive where he just decided to stick to his game plan and said, we're blitzing 7 or 8, do what you can about it. And a lot of that is VJ just timing multiple blitzes absolutely perfectly. I gave him a D, and it really just does come down to that last drive kind of working out for K-State. But I think that this is one of the rare times where Clanderman has been way too stubborn with the game plan, because normally he's been very, very good at adjusting, at least at halftime. No, he just said, no, the game plan is we're blitzing and we're going to keep blitzing. You cannot convince us to do otherwise. Which, part of me applauds that stubbornness, but I would only applaud it if it was working.
Yeah. I gave Joe Clanderman, I gave him the grade of a D as well. I was not particularly happy. Shocking revelation, I know, with how the defense played in this game. And I think a lot of it was that we didn't really seem ready for what KU was going to do. Which, granted, they did do some different things that we haven't really seen much of this year. And they definitely came out a bit more motivated, it seemed, than they have for a few of their other games. But a big issue I had in this game was KU was 8 of 13 on third down in this game. And at one point, they were 7 of 8 on third down. So at one point, it was pretty much a guaranteed KU was going to get the first down against us. But it was a really rough, particularly kind of beginning portion of the game for Clanderman. But after their touchdown late in the third quarter, in the fourth, it was punt, fumble, turnover on downs, which, granted, some of the punts, I guess is a good time.
It's an insane choice to punt on that first one.
I think there was 2 times in this game where KU punted inside of our territory, and I was genuinely shocked. I thought it was the most obvious fake punt situation of all time. I think there was multiple times where we just didn't believe them and left our base defense on the field.
I think both times we did.
Yeah.
Because Parrish was back.
Yeah, and I was really surprised that they were that content playing field position as opposed to continuing to roll against the defense, who really up until late in the game, they were kind of doing whatever they wanted against the defense. But wow, they definitely made some interesting choices when it comes to play calling in this one. And I'll give credit to Jeff Grimes for helping deliver this win for K-State, because I don't think we could have done it without him. But Joe Clanderman, though, yeah, any game where you're on the brink of getting outclassed and outcoached by Jeff Grimes, that's a day where you need to seriously consider doing some inward reflection afterwards, and maybe take a retreat and reconsider your coaching philosophies, because that was not a good showing game plan wise for K-State. But like you said, the decision to switch up our blitzing strategy towards the end by dropping another linebacker, but bringing VJ from the secondary on the blitz to add some speed to get home a little quicker, because most of the blitzes were starting to develop, but a lot of the time it was just a step or two too late. We just weren't quite getting there. But so that was a good adjustment to make on that last drive to force Jalen out of the pocket a little bit more, because Jalen's just not a very good quarterback under pressure.
No, you didn't have to say the under pressure part.
So Jalen's not a very good quarterback, but this was a so then that's the saving grace, I guess, for Joe Kleinerman in this one, that he is able to just avoid a failing grade.
I feel like offensive and defensive MVPs are pretty easy. It's Avery Johnson and Austin Romaine.
Yeah, I have no quarrel with that. It's pretty obvious, I think.
Yeah. So for takeaways from this game, we just survived the best shot that we will get from a main rivalry in a game where emotions ran high and there needed to be a clutch moment at the end. This team is not the same as K-State teams of old, where a lot of times, especially in us running the show, like K-State would either be like wire to wire winners or trail for a very, very short time in their wins. But in their losses, there was just some critical juncture, critical mistake where they just fell behind and couldn't recover. This team isn't like that. This team sort of has that it factor to go out in the high pressure situations and come through, which is what the good teams do. A good team doesn't blow everyone out every week. That's just for the elite of the elite teams. And I think this is a really, really good team for K-State. I think there's only like 2 elite teams in the country. So I don't give out the term elite to just about anyone. But I think that this K-State team is a really, really good team that is capable of surviving games where they trip on themselves a little bit. And to do that against your biggest rivalry to make sure that the KU losing streak can now drive itself to one, it's massive. It's big.
Yeah. I agree. This kind of felt like a game that maybe a lot of K-State teams in the past would have dropped. Because, KU gave us a lot of help in this game, but we gave KU a lot of help as well. Both teams kind of seemed to be playing hot potato with the victory for a while until we seemed to kind of finally figure it out in the fourth quarter. But, yeah, this was a game that required some nerves and some clutch kicking and the defense to step up when throughout 75% of the game we hadn't really been able to rely on them that much. So yeah, this is a huge win. Even though KU's a 2-6 team, we knew we were going to get their best shot, and even though they took us off balance for a while, we were still able to recover. We didn't just lay down.
Yeah, which that's massively impressive. And there, in terms of Big 12, zooming out for Big 12 title aspirations, BYU and Iowa State still at the top of the conference. But, it's pretty much separated to the 3 contenders are Iowa State, BYU, and K-State. Texas Tech has eliminated themselves. Colorado, I guess you could consider up there with the contenders, but K-State holds tiebreaker over them. So okay, yeah, we'll count Colorado in the contending tier, but I feel like they've really separated themselves, which I'll take this 10 seconds to laugh hysterically at Utah, not because they lost to Houston, but because I truly believe that, and this isn't me saying it because I'm scared of jinxes. I genuinely believe that a Houston team led by Willie Fritz can upset anyone at any given time, and that scares the piss out of me. But Utah constantly, talking all this whenever they join the conference, only to, vomit on themselves, is hilarious. But, right now, all K-State needs to do is take care of business and just keep winning, control what they can control, because technically they control their own destiny.
Yeah, that remains true. K-State has 4 games left on its regular season schedule. If K-State wins all 4 of those games, they will be in Arlington facing somebody, probably BYU at this point. Although KU does have BYU and Iowa State, so if they want to help their older brother with
KU's not winning another game this year.
Yeah,
this is the type where your back's broken, you don't do a damn thing.
Yeah, that is honestly the worry. They may get back to their records of old, so to speak. But I don't know. I'm still holding out hope, I guess, at least that. Particularly, I'd like to see Iowa State drop a game or two. BYU, at this point, that ship has just kind of sailed. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. If we take care of our business, then we'll be in regardless.
And this is just another example of K-State taking care of business and, woodshedding the Jayhawks for the 16th year in a row. Do you know that the movie Cars, I don't think Cars 2 had been out yet the last time that KU beat K-State?
No, I did not know that, but that does not surprise me at all. I think the last time KU beat K-State was the year the Iron Man came out. It was the same year that The Dark Knight came out.
Yeah. Crazy stuff.
It is.
You have any final notes before we sign off?
Let's not do that again. K-State. I'd rather just win all our games by 70, please.
Yeah, I would much rather Cats by 90 for the rest of the year. Yeah. But with that being said, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast. If you want to follow or contact the show, you can follow us just about anywhere at Aggieville Alleycats. And if you want to email us, we're AggievilleAlleycats@gmail.com. If you want to follow us on a more personal note, I am at ACEdward00.
I am at Connor Bounces, or capital C, capital B.
And if you want to support the show financially, please be sure to check out both the official Aggieville Alleycats merch store and the supporters link, both found in our podcast and Twitter bios. But most importantly, thank you all for listening to this episode of the Aggieville Alleycats podcast, where come rain, shine, or anything in between, we're here to deliver to you the Kansas State sporting news that you so love. Stay safe, Alleycats.